and welcome to episode 94 of Radio Gorepress. My name is Rosie, and with me as ever is my beautiful co-host Sarah. How are you doing, Sarah?
Hello. Do you want the honest answer?
I mean, 2020 is being very extra at the moment, isn't it?
It's been a bit of a bastard this year, and it continues to be a bit of a bastard, and yeah, everything sort of sucks a little bit at the moment. I'm not gonna lie.
I don't know about you, I am over lockdown 2.0.
Oh yeah, 100%. I was over it. I was never under it. To be honest,
continuously over it.
Yeah.
Always over it.
Yes,
definitely
absolutely.
On top of it. I can't, like, lockdown 1 was like, yes, we need to do this is very important, let's all stick to the rules, and I'm sticking to the rules this time, but it's fucking boring. I'm bored.
I mean, I think you and I appear to be in the minority of people who are actually sticking to it. If I do the curtain twitching thing, nobody watch. Everyone's outside. Everyone's
Your
on the
hand
roads.
motions made it look like you were climbing out of a vagina just then.
Is that how babies are born?
That's how they hook their tiny little baby fingers around either side and just stretch their head through
And just go boop.
and go, hello. That's how
word.
babies are made.
Right. I've been woefully misinformed this entire time.
I mean, there's a potential that it might be me, but I don't think it is.
I mean, you and I have never had children, individually or together. I realised when I said you and I, like, as if we're a couple.
You're correct. We have not birthed a child between us.
So we might not be the best people to ask.
I've seen videos, and there was definitely some, like, little heed pukenut.
Well, this took a turn. I'm glad I've got a coffee.
Me too, yeah, because I need another one. That sounds like a brilliant idea.
This all feels very wrong straight off the bat, because we're used to recording it in the evening, and it is now midday on a Saturday, and I'm very confused.
It's lunchtime. It's lunchtime, and we are going to talk about the cheerful romp of 2018.
Jesus fucking Christ. I would just like to firstly preface this entire thing by apologising to you.
I mean, thanks.
To you, to any of our listeners that have watched this film in preparation for this show, to my other half, who I think may be potentially permanently traumatised. It was his first introduction to Gaspar Noé, so...
Gaspar Noé, as I like to call him.
That's the same joke he made last night. Oh, God. For fuck's sake, there's two of you now. Oh, no.
Yay! You're fucked. I'm sorry.
But yeah, it can't have been that bad, because I've not been dumped yet, but I don't think it was an enjoyable...
but there's time!
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say.
I don't think it's been an enjoyable experience for anyone involved.
Can you really say that any of Gaspar Noé's films could be classed as enjoyable?
Love. There's a lot of unsimulated sex in it, so if you're a perv like me, it's great.
I mean, Noé said himself that he likes his films to be, or he wants his films to be very divisive and make people feel very uncomfortable.
Oh, gold star to that man. He's succeeded.
I mean, honestly, I think that's pretentious as shit, but we'll get on to
is.
that.
He is, 100%. But I want to start by saying we had originally planned to do a different film this week.
Yes.
But circumstances, let's just call it like the curse of 2020, intervened and meant that we couldn't record on our usual day. And Phil was not available for the rescheduled one, and he really wanted to be a part of the film that we were originally going to talk about. So we've saved that for a fortnight's time.
Fucking
and because
Phil.
Yeah, fucking hell, Pip.
With his Dungeons and Dragons and his birthdays.
I completely forgot. He shirked it for D&D.
He did. All you guys who are listening in right now, Phil wants to be a wizard
more than he wants to be a podcaster. Make of that what you will.
He wants to live in a fantasy land. And I say this coming from a place of playing D&D and really enjoying it.
I want to live in a fantasy land. Should I take up D&D? Just to escape the horrors of real life.
Do you know what? It's genuinely so much fun. And it's very little actual role-playing that happens. And a lot of just pissing about and eating snacks.
Oh, I like both of those things very much.
See, it's really good.
Okay.
I thoroughly recommend it. And then every so often you can be like, I'm a fucking bard! And sing a happy song.
Oh, nobody wants to hear me sing.
Probably don't be a bard then.
Okay, noted. But we kind of landed on Climax because I've been aware of this film since it came out a couple of years ago, and I've seen people rave about it. People whose opinions I trust. But because it's Gaspar Noé, I've been sort of putting it off because I'm like, I don't feel like being emotionally eviscerated this week. Maybe I'll delay it.
You need to be in the right kind of headspace, don't you?
Yeah. You say that. So I watched it on Monday, and I immediately shot you a text just to say, you need to watch this film. It's exactly the sort of like self-indulgent, pretentious nightmare fuel that you might enjoy. And then when we had to come up with a film to do on the spur of the moment, I was like, fuck it, let's do that. I've seen it already. And I made the mistake of watching it twice in a single week.
Just to really, like, compound those images burned into the back of your retinas.
Yes. Now I think I'm certifiably cuckoo. I need I need sectioning. Oh yeah, it's tipped me over the edge. This is what did it.
Oh no.
Yeah, past the point of no return now.
I'll be honest, I didn't care for it.
This is going to be an interesting one then, because I fucking loved it.
All the separate parts of the film were like technically brilliant, and there's lots of interesting little like Easter eggs and stuff which we'll get onto, but I just think Noé's a bit of a twat. I think my problem was I quite enjoyed it, and then I did like my standard thing preparing for the podcast where I was like reading up about it and reading up about like the director, and he just sounds like a wally. Like, imagine. So this Climax got rave reviews, like
it did,
massively popular, and he hated that.
Yeah, it's his first film that did seem to do critically well across the board. Normally, as you said, his films are very divisive, and that's not limited to audiences, that's amongst critics as well. Whereas this one was like uniformly critically lauded.
Yeah, and he was like, oh no, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. No, don't like my films. No, I'm meant to be incredibly tortured, and this is meant to be awful. It's a vision of my nightmares. I can't believe you like it. And I was like, oh, come on. Like, but you're all right with taking the money for it, aren't you?
Well, similarly, I read an interview with him about Climax, and I think the interviewer was maybe not that well versed in his work, and kind of said like, oh, 6 people walked out. How do you think about that? You know, what do you think about that? And he was like, oh, only 6. It's normally 25% of the audience.
I'm mellowing in my age.
Yeah. To be honest, and this is going to sound a little bit weird, I would consider Climax to be one of his more accessible films that I've seen. I haven't seen all of them.
I mean, the only other film by him I've seen is Irreversible.
Right, which I will never watch again. And yeah, I've seen Climax twice in 1 week, so...
Yeah.
It's a different kind of trauma.
Yeah, it is. It's, I think it's easier to separate yourself from the trauma of it because everyone is in this like LSD psychotic fueled nightmare, and actually you and I don't take drugs.
Do you know what?
So I think it's much easier to separate yourself from what's happening because it's not something you can necessarily relate to having gone through, you know?
Yeah, I will say I don't currently take drugs. This year may drive me to it. We'll see. There's a month and a half left. No, I've never done LSD, and if this is indicative of what it's like to be on LSD, it's a hard pass from me.
Yeah, if anything, this is like wholesale put me off psychotropic chemicals.
Yeah.
Wholesale. Like, not about that life.
Maybe that was his intention. It was just like one long Dare commercial.
I think what the film was essentially saying was, don't take LSD unless you're gonna start taking LSD all the time, and then it's fine.
So, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, there are no ending credits, which we'll talk about later. What they should have ended it with was the Grange Hill cast just say no.
Got Martin from EastEnders.
That should have been
no.
Yeah,
nay.
That should have been the outro.
I completely agree. I mean, again, he did this like incredibly, in my eyes, pretentious thing. At first I was like, ooh, that's interesting. And then as it went on, I was like, no, fuck you. Where they started the film with the end credits, and then they had like the mid-roll credits where they had the cast and crew listed. And then you only find out what the film's actually called right at the end of the film.
Yeah.
Like a climax. It's so on the nose.
I'm gonna be honest. Right. Okay. We're gonna disagree a lot during this show, I think, and that's unusual for us. This is gonna be a brand new experience, I think. I fucking loved the structure of it because I think, a trademark of him and his filmmaking is to just say, fuck your cinematic structure. Like,
yeah,
how dare you suggest that I have a beginning, a middle, and an end?
He gets all rage
do what
against
I want.
the machine about it.
Yeah. The end credits at the beginning, I feel like is sort of his way of just being like, right, the formalities are done with, let's get to the meat of it now. And I think that serves two purposes. One, because he just wants that shit out of the way. And two, because when you watch a film that's as harrowing and as bleak as something like this, like I would compare Ari Aster's work to this sort of level of like bleakness. Particularly Hereditary. But at the end of those films, because it's got a typical structure, you get the end credits where you can kind of go, oh,
breathe out.
And this just fucking ends and it throws you. And I kind of love that. It just sort of leaves you.
Did you get a little death afterwards?
Le petit mort.
Mm.
Wait, no, that's an orgasm.
No, le petit mort is the little death that comes afterwards.
But that's just what they call orgasm, though, isn't it?
I don't think so.
The little death. It is, I swear.
I mean, fine.
But anyway, shall we start at the start?
Which is the end, but the start.
Yeah. What were your first impressions when you see, obviously, it begins with a girl stumbling out into the snow.
And making a snow angel.
The most fucked up, bloody snow angel. Which is probably just the...
She's just having a lovely time.
She's living her best snow angel life at this point. But it's kind of indicative of the film to follow, because a huge percentage of this film is people writhing around on the floor screaming.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, the script was like 5 pages long.
Yeah.
And the rest of it was just pure improvisation.
Yeah.
Which I really appreciate. I really rate the actors for as well, actually, with it being improvised, because improvisation is fucking hard at the best of times.
Yeah. Just to stop you, I do want to touch on that again. But that
yeah, of course.
So that opening shot, what were your first impressions? Because obviously he does his like trademark spinning camera thing, and then it opens up, so you sort of get more of an idea of the scale of it. Because at the minute she could be at the start she could be anywhere.
Yeah,
and we don't know the magnitude of where she is. Like it's not immediately apparent.
My first impressions of it was that it was probably a shot of things to come, like I did automatically assume it was like an end game shot, but maybe it was going to be something like she'd been dreadfully wronged and she was like escaping a hell house, and which I mean technically isn't incorrect, but I'd read nothing about Climax before I saw it, and it's like the synopsis everywhere is like bunch of French dance students have a party and somebody laces the sangria with LSD. That's what it is. But I didn't know that, so I thought maybe it was like a rape revenge, something along those lines, and yeah, I wasn't expecting what came next.
That
I can say for sure.
So obviously,
how did you see it first off? I thought it was very beautiful.
Yeah. Much like yourself, I made the assumption that it was a time jump. And that we would, having seen this, we would then get the backstory, the gaps would be filled. That's what she said.
Yeah.
I think I'm a little bit burnt out on his sort of spinning camera technique. I think it's great in terms of disorienting the audience. And I think Irreversible is the perfect example of that, because the spinning camera in that opening scene where there is, I guess, the climactic moment of that film.
Yeah.
Which is obviously the beginning of it, because the whole thing is in reverse. But that kind of extreme act of violence coupled with the noise at the particular frequency designed to make you feel nauseous, and the spinning
it's just
camera
all very
work.
Overwhelming.
Yeah. So I think he does utilize these techniques as a way of just making the audience feel uneasy from minute one. But I feel like we've seen it. It's a bit overdone.
It's kind of lazy. And it felt a little bit like every scene in this movie was considered for spinny camera action. Like every scene in this film was considered for slow motion.
Yeah.
Like it felt a bit like that. Like, oh, how can we make this weirder? Oh, spin the camera around.
Yeah. To play devil's advocate, I would say he is the master of doing that. And I think it does.
Yeah, he's very fucking good at it.
It works. It has the desired effect, but it does get a bit much. I think maybe he rests on it a little bit too much.
I feel like knowing that girl, Lou...
oh, good. You know their names.
No, I don't. I only know hers. I know some of them. I feel like her knowing that she didn't drink the sangria, like you find that out pretty early on, that she didn't drink it, made me think, well, why did he use that camera motion then? I felt like that was intrinsically linked to being like psychotically altered.
In a way she was, because she was driven to madness, as we later find out. Yeah.
But is it in the same...
It's not the same ballpark.
Like, plane of existence.
No. Yeah. No, I see
it's much more
saying.
Visceral than...
Yeah.
Like, just fucking weird and floaty and... Well, I say floaty.
But I would argue that, I guess by that token, the fact that she's pictured in perfect white snow is sort of a reflection of her purity compared to everybody else,
and
perhaps.
Literally, she creates the shape of an angel.
Yeah.
She does make a snow angel as she's writhing around in the snow. It's just, it's tainted with blood.
Yes.
And I found it interesting that decided to use the camera angle, I guess, of her like crawling downwards across the screen.
Yeah.
And there's lots of references that I noticed, or lots of sort of like nods towards people like climbing into hell.
Oh, this is 100% their Dante's Inferno.
Fuck yeah.
Agreed, yes.
Various different like levels created with different lighting, and like some areas have different noises, and they're all very, it's like episodic rooms.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, very much like different levels of hell.
Yeah,
which I thought was neat. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not gonna completely hate on him.
You can appreciate a film without liking it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So obviously, we have the end credits, we have the opening scene with Lou, and then it skips straight to some stuff that apparently was filmed last minute that was not intended for use in the film, and that was the straight to camera, like, talking heads interviews. Apparently it was Gaspar Noé himself, and I think somebody else who worked on the film, who were acting as the interviewers, and they were just sort of taking some of the actors from their dressing rooms saying, can you just do a bit of to camera work,
preamble.
And that they'd never intended to use that.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I think it works really nicely as an introduction to some of the characters and how intensely they feel about dance. I think that was a good way of doing it.
Them saying that like dance is life, and if they couldn't have dance, then they'd just die. And that was cool. I felt like the names flashing up on the screen, which are kind of the only time that you really hear their names. Like, their names aren't spoken very much.
No, they say Selva quite a lot because I guess she's considered the main character.
The like protagonist,
Yeah, the choreographer, I guess.
But it was interesting that like the names flashed up, but they only flashed up for a second. So the idea that kind of like your name doesn't matter, and actually it's a massive cast in terms of named characters.
Mm-hmm.
So the names don't really matter, and you want to be looking at the people and the bodies rather than what their names are or what they stand for or anything like that. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I also found it some kind of like incredibly like self-congratulatory masturbatory task in just lining the TV with all of his influences of philosophers and pre-1950s Hollywood cinema and horror films. And
I fucking loved that. I'm not gonna lie. I thought
that was. Do you not think it's so pretentious?
Oh, it's massively wanky, but I fucking loved it. I made a note of a bunch of the ones that I recognised. Obviously, Possession, which I only watched this year for the first time, actually. But there's a really infamous subway scene.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the actress's name, and that's gonna bug me. But she just goes ham. Like, she goes hell for leather, full on hysterical breakdown, and it is brilliant. It's insane.
You're like, I want to do that.
But it reminded me so much of the point at which Selva, like when it really kicks
like
in,
pulling down the curtains and
just going wild, like the animalistic screams and like contorting her body and just spinning around, and like that had to be a massive influence. So I think it's some, like, a lot of it is there to pay homage to films that he loves.
Yeah.
But I think because so many of the titles were like banned at the time or considered quite transgressive, it's massive foreshadowing of what's to follow, because so many of them feature madness and hysteria.
And he's got like Suspiria and Le Droit du Plus Fort, and he's got like films which are definitely based in like hysteria and madness.
Yeah. And Zombie, which was I can't remember which country, but the European title for Dawn of the Dead.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So people literally kind of infected and reduced to their baser instincts. You know,
of course, like on the left side. So he had books on one side and VHS and the other, didn't he?
Yeah.
And the books were more my jam, to be honest. Do you know what? The thing that annoys me the most is because I found it so fucking pretentious, but I was like, I like all that shit.
Yeah.
That's my jam.
Well, apparently there was a book that I think is still banned. It was a French book that basically translates to like how to commit suicide. And genuinely, and that's literally what the book was, and it was quite rightly condemned and banned. But again, quite heavy-handed hints at what's to come.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of foreshadowing in it, but he's got Nietzsche in there, he's got Molinier in there, he's got a philosopher called Emile Cioran,
some Fritz Lang.
Emile Cioran specifically was renowned for being like hyper ultra negative about life and humanity.
Oh, same.
Yeah, babe, same. He's got work by Kafka, and Kafka was a playwright who made Metamorphosis and The Trial.
Franz
both
Kafka
of which are
is
very
fucking dense as heck. I could never get through any of it.
What an odd fucking man Kafka was. Yeah, I studied him. That was fun. Oh, yeah, as part of my thesis studies. Very, very interesting man. Clearly very tormented. Had some weird fucking dreams about men turning into bugs. But yeah, this whole like idea of like metamorphosis and the unfairness of humanity and the sheer like nihilism of it all. Like nihilism plays a massive part in this film, obviously. Yeah, Fritz Lang made he made You Only Live Once, which was like a pre-1950s Hollywood film.
Metropolis.
Metropolis, yeah, of course. Stuff about like the secret societies in there. He's got some Oscar Wilde in there. Like all of these tiny little bits of like, fuck the world, I hate everyone. This is a transformative experience. And it's going to be scary and you're going to want to kill yourself by the end of it. And he's basically like listed out how the film is going to go and all of these bits around the TV.
In a way, yeah. Massive foreshadowing.
Like, you could spend so long just looking at that little library around
Oh, I
the
did.
screen.
I paused it.
Yeah, for sure. I was like, what is this? What interesting things are here? It's like going around to someone's house and looking at their book collection.
Well, I mean, the VHS and the books they are his personal collection.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
I also think it's worth noting that I think the TV, the formatting size, which I think was 1:33 ratio, and that just the sheer fact that there are VHS on the right hand side was a really neat, concise way to establish the era.
Yeah, because it's like based in 1996, was it? It's in the 90s. It was
either 95 or 96, yeah, so like 25 years ago now.
I know that he made a point of like telling the actors to not talk about anything which could be considered anachronistic, like cell phones or anything like that, because he wanted to make the time period obvious but not like allude to it at all.
Yeah, I thought that was really, I mean, to me that's good filmmaking. Show don't tell. It
had a bit of a It Follows vibe in terms of that, like this kind of vague like anachronism, because it's not necessarily based in reality either.
Well, weirdly it is sort of, because it's based on very vaguely based on a true story.
It's an urban legend, maybe.
Well, no, it's a thing that happened. There was a group of dancers in France who were having a private party one night, and somebody laced their sangria with LSD. None of the other shit happened.
I was about to say, they all died.
They just had a terrible experience, but it was loosely based on an actual thing that happened.
Interestingly, during that video bit there is only one note that I made, which was Psyche, who's the German girl, saying like a guy used to drop LSD acid in his eyes, and I wrote that down at the time because I was like, in his eyes? That's fucking weird. I've never heard of that.
Sounds like a very quick way to get conjunctivitis, but okay, you do you.
It sounds very unsanitary. But yeah, it turns out that I was making the right notes at the time.
See, weirdly, I acknowledged it, but I didn't think anything of it on first watch. On second watch, obviously like, alarm bells started to go off. And actually, obviously we're going to get massively into heavy spoiler territory from here on out. So throughout the film, we do not know who it was who spiked the sangria.
Like a game of wink murder.
This is the most fucked up game of Clue I've ever seen. It was Psyche in the church hall with the LSD. But it's really interesting to watch that, knowing how it plays out and who did it. And that's why I think it warrants a second watch. And that's why I'm happy I watched it a second time at least. Because I didn't, unlike you, I didn't pick up on that the first time around. And watching it from minute one, knowing that is really interesting because obviously we're going to talk about the opening dance number, which I loved and you did not care for. I already know this.
I have thoughts. I have thoughts on it.
But what was really interesting to me is that, I mean, that shot to me is outstanding. The single take, the choreography involved, all of it.
It's like a 10-minute take, isn't it?
It's fucking brilliant. But she does not show up until like 4 minutes into the dance sequence. And she appears...
Oh, do you think that's pointed?
Not on first watch, no.
Oh, because she's lacing the sangria.
And she comes in from stage right.
Ah,
right.
Oh, smart. Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then the shot immediately after that, when they're sort of dispersing and dishing out the drinks, she's stood at the far end of the table by herself, leaning against the wall and just watching.
Oh, she's sneaky.
Yeah, and on second watch, that was really interesting.
Okay. I mean, getting to the end of the film and then sort of like percolating it and looking back, I realised this is like jumping straight to the end and then we'll get back to the point we were talking about. But she is the only person in that entire film who just has a fucking lovely time.
She's laughing at some points. She's the only person having a good trip. That's for sure.
She just has a wonderful time all the way through that, and she's just so chilled out. She doesn't lose her marbles at all.
I think there's one point that really made me laugh. Because
was it when she pissed on the floor?
Because all I could think of was you.
Assert
dominance! Piss on it!
I don't like that you see someone pissing on the floor and you think of me.
But all I could think was, Rosie would be so proud.
I'm not okay with that. To be fair, she did stop pissing and I was like, yeah, go on, girl.
But again, watching it a second time, it's just like, she is literally asserting dominance. Yeah. And
it's a power game.
It's so fucked up and I loved it.
And when Selva says, do you want to clean this up, and tries to hand her a towel, she just looks at her and then looks down like, no, you fucking do it. You clean up my piss.
I kind of love it. But I think that's the first thing that happens. When people start, I think it's Selva sort of goes up to Daddy, the DJ.
I love Daddy. I hate his name, but I love him.
Yeah, his kill was like chef kiss. But I think it's Selva who sort of first starts to notice that she's feeling a little bit not quite right, and looks over at Psyche, who is then pissing on the floor and realizes, oh shit, something's really wrong. But that's like the first kind of mark, at which point it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it's her that sets off the chain in both senses. I thought that was interesting.
they throw you a bit of a red herring because I actually thought to myself, something's not right with the sangria.
Mm-hmm.
Because David, who is probably a bit right-wing, definitely a bit of a twat, automatically gets 2 cups of sangria and just starts trying to give it to anyone who'll take it. So actually, from that point where he was trying to give it to anyone, I was like, oh fuck, has he spiked that drink? Has he spiked the sangria and he's trying to pass it off to girls?
Well, he downs a couple of glasses of it at one point, like in quick succession. I was just like, oh fuck, David, no.
What are you doing, David? No. But yeah, I kind of clocked that something was up with the sangria, but I was totally in the wrong ballpark with what had actually happened. Going back to the 10-minute take, the dance.
Okay, let's talk about it.
So I messaged Sarah when I got to midway through the film to the mid-roll credits, because my internet went off. I had to like take a break in between the 2 parts, which was probably a good idea. But I messaged her and I went, are they meant to be really bad dancers?
They're not, though. This is what baffles me. Like, that technically they're excellent. And again, I will argue,
technically they're wiggling their hands about on top of their head.
Can you do that?
Look how good I am at that.
You've just proved my point.
No, I haven't. Like, that's I understand that they might find it pleasurable to move their body in that way, and I'm not telling them not to do it, but it doesn't look like dancing.
Right, okay. Well, I appreciated it for different reasons. One of the reasons, again, being that it's really indicative of the era. It was another really neat way to establish the fact that this was mid-90s. And I think it was really interesting that it was quite obviously heavily influenced by like the New York sort of ballroom scene in like the 80s, drag balls, that kind of thing, voguing, crumping.
Oh, definitely.
All of that sort of shit that was around in the sort of very late 70s, 80s, 90s. I thought like, all, voguing, death drops, all that sort of stuff. I thought that was really neat.
I know that you have like a much deeper knowledge of like dance and the history of dance than I do.
I don't know if I would go that far.
It's not okay. It's not necessarily that I thought that like the dancing was like the types of dancing were bad.
You just don't find it visually appealing.
Well, no, I felt like if I'm used to group dancing being a lot more cohesive and slick. Yeah. And that wasn't.
All right. Yeah, it wasn't super... It didn't feel precise.
No, it felt really messy and it felt really sloppy. And that's the part where I was like, are they meant to be like bad at dancing? Because you find out that's like their final night, isn't it? Yeah. They've been working together for months and that's their final night dancing together, and then they have a party to celebrate. Mm-hmm. So I was like, surely you should be a bit more fucking together at this point.
I think there was definitely method in the madness, but I also completely appreciate what you're saying. Like, it's not what we've come to expect from like a group dance troupe.
And again, having gone into it blind as well, like, because not knowing what era it's meant to be set in, not knowing like who these people are apart from what you see on a little video screen at the beginning. Like, there's nothing to really give it away that it is... you get the idea that it's, like, quite a... What's the word I want to use? Quite an exclusive, like, dance troupe. Mm-hmm. But again, that sort of surprised me. That, like, it's very exclusive, but so why isn't it perfect? Yeah. Which, I mean, I guess is a, like, very personal...
But yeah, I guess...
Like, things to be polished.
Perfect is subjective, I suppose. I think it's really good that they, with the exception of one or two characters, they weren't actors. They were all professional dancers.
I think it was only Selva that was actually a trained actor.
Yeah.
I think everyone else was like a trained dancer but had never acted before.
Yeah. Well, she was certainly the only one I recognised anyway.
Which again gives credence to like how good they were at improvisation.
Yeah.
Like obviously there's a lot of dance influences throughout the entire thing. It's kind of the point of it, but
does it not make you like question who they are as people? Because the first half of the film, post dance sequence, is kind of fly on the wall conversations. You're just getting nuggets of these people's conversations. And apparently Gaspar Noé just sort of said, just mingle, talk, and I'll film it. So they genuinely just talk about dance and sex all the time. That's what these people talk about. Yeah, just like anal and stuff like that. Like, but does it
splitting someone's arsehole open with a baton?
Again, like thematically with the last minisode, what is people's obsession with going in dry, Rosie?
Oh my god, seriously? Like, oh, I don't care. No lube. Yeah, I'll love it. No lube. Why? That's not pleasant for anyone.
Sir, if you are going in dry, you are doing it wrong. Is all I'm going to say.
That worries me, actually. That really worries me. The idea that they were told to just mingle and talk and they'd record them. Like, I'm assuming that interaction is scripted.
Well, this is what...
The interaction between... I can't remember their names, but two guys basically talking about how they're going to rape somebody.
Yeah. But that's what I was kind of leading up to. Like, do you think... Because you've talked already, the script was like 5 pages. The bulk of this movie is ad-libbed. Are we assuming that they're terrible people? Or, like, do you think they were given sort of breadcrumbs and told to work with that? I guess in some cases they must have been. Actually, going back to the massive foreshadowing in the Talking Heads, you made the point about Psyche talking about her housemate in Berlin doing LSD through his eyes, and she didn't want to end up like Christiane F., which was quite a nice reference that not like most people wouldn't really get. But she apparently in the Talking Heads, she was the only one who was given the topic to talk about. She was told to mention that. Everybody else, it was just completely random. So I guess there must have been, off the back of that, there must have been other instances where they sort of gave them breadcrumbs and like a starter topic and told to improvise based on that. You would hope, because otherwise they're just terrible people, right?
I mean, arguably, yeah. I think that a couple of the guys in the Talking Heads make reference to like how hot all the girls are and how they like want to sleep with them and stuff. And that's, gross, ill, but not like
it happens.
Outwardly. It's not overtly like, okay, you're actually planning on how to rape somebody at the moment and how you're going to do it and what you're going to say to them, the room you're going to take them to. That was one of close to the most uncomfortable moment in the film for me.
What, that conversation? Okay.
Yeah, I hated it. I hated every single second of that conversation.
I think you were supposed to, though. I think you...
Yeah, that's definitely the intention. I don't think anyone's meant to watch it and be like, oh, how funny. Like, it's meant to be like
so
visceral and visceral and like, I fucking hate you right now.
Yeah.
Which was the point at which I said to you, I just want to like trash the whole world and start again. I'm done with this shit. I'm done with there being people like that in the world, because there are people like that in the world.
Oh yeah, of course.
And it's fucking horrifying. It gave me this, like, it makes an interesting commentary on the idea of this, like, toxic masculinity as well, I think. 2 guys shooting the shit, talking about how they're going to split someone's arsehole open.
But it wasn't just those 2. It was like David and Omar were having kind of a similar conversation about sleeping with the female dancers.
Yeah.
So
the females in the film, the women in the film are definitely very objectified.
Oh, hugely. But also a lot of them are dickheads as well.
Yeah, of course. But the women never have a conversation with each other about what they're going to do to the men in the group.
That's true, actually. Would this film pass the Bechdel test?
I have no idea. No. But yeah, they don't talk about stuff like that. And actually, Lou, when she's telling Selva that she's pregnant, it takes a lot for her to come out with something that personal. Mm-hmm. Like, there's no personal information that's shared between the women.
No, that's true. And she even says it in quite a weird, descriptive way. She doesn't say, I'm pregnant. She sort of says, I've got something growing in my tummy.
Growing in me. Yeah.
And then Selva's like, a what?
Selva's like a worm? Do you have a tapeworm? Is that what you're trying to say? A parasite? Their relationships, all the women in the film, their relationship is much more physical than it is verbal. Yeah. Like, they're all a lot closer to each other.
But even then, in quite a number of cases, it's still sexual.
Yeah. There's a really kind of, like, iconic point for me anyway, where so Lou's pregnant and essentially she gets booted in the stomach as soon as she's told Selva about it by Dom.
I want to say Dom,
the lead singer from Skunk and Nancy.
Yes.
By Skin.
Let's call her Skin,
and she reacts so well. Like, her reaction is spot on what I would imagine that to be.
Yeah.
But there's this iconic moment where everybody's accusing her of poisoning the sangria because she didn't drink it, and she like slashes at her arms, and it's only one girl who I think is called Cyber, who like calms her down a bit, and calms her down so that their faces are like resting on each other just like they're about to kiss.
Yeah.
And it's really like this very incredibly intimate moment in the middle of all of this chaos. Yeah, I find that like a lot of the moments and interactions between women in this film are very much like quite sensual, very intimate, very physical, whereas the guys tend to be standing apart and talking.
It's very bro-y. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. It definitely enforces some stereotypes, I think.
So going back quickly to the moment with Lou that you were talking about, she's actually not the first person who's accused, though.
No.
Prior to that,
Omar?
Prior to that. And I wonder if this is sort of a comment on perhaps like Islamophobia or something, which is reasonably prevalent in France, I believe.
Yes, it is.
And it's interesting that he is the only sort of, I'm guessing, Muslim character. And they immediately point the finger at him and heartbreakingly shove him outside. And he's just left to the elements. And obviously we find out right at the end that he just froze to death outside the door.
Yeah. Which is awful.
It's horrible. And I think it's made more heartbreaking that by the time you see his body outside, I'd forgotten he was even in it.
Yeah, because he's in it for such a short space of time, and his removal from the building is very much like within, I don't know, like 30 seconds of being accused, he's out the door.
And agonizingly, he's actually one of the nicer characters.
Yeah.
I would argue. So yeah, it's at that point that the altercation with Lou and Dom happens, and she's the second person to be accused because obviously she didn't drink the sangria. How did you feel about that moment? Because she seemed to be, I don't know, obviously we have no prior knowledge of her mental health, what she was going through, but she seemed to descend into madness very quickly despite not having been drugged.
It seemed like super unstable.
Yeah.
I don't know, like, I knew she was pregnant from the outset. Because Telltale, like, oh no, I'm not having a drink, I'm not feeling good. Like, oh, okay, you're pregnant then. And talking to people about, like, babies and stuff. Like, they didn't make any
she was one of the few people to interact with Tito as well, the
Yeah.
little boy.
Yeah. I find it interesting that the people who interact with Tito are obviously Tito's mother, her and Selva.
Yeah.
And Selva and Lou and this other woman, the only women that you know are or have been pregnant, which leads me to think maybe Selva's been through something similar. And that's why she gets told, that's why she cares so much about Tito, that's why she interacts with all these people.
I think the fact... Sorry, just
I didn't necessarily find it that believable.
Okay. Well, I was about to say, like, obviously none of us know how we would react if there's a literal braying mob yelling at you to kill yourself.
Yeah.
That's unimaginable.
Yeah, of course.
But I don't think I would go from 0 to slashing myself up quite that fast. I was terrified at that moment. The first time I watched it, I was just like, oh, fuck. Is she going to? Because obviously... because
they're just telling her to, like, abort her baby. And she full on punches herself in the stomach over and over again.
Yeah. It's horrifying.
I found that bit the worst part of the film.
That was incredibly hard to watch. Yeah.
Yeah. I found that bit so difficult to watch. I felt for her in my fucking bones.
Yeah. I wonder if she'd done much acting before, because she was really good, I thought.
I thought she was brilliant, yeah. And she had a really great sort of respect for what she was acting as well. None of it was hammed up. None of it was what I would consider to be overly dramatic. Mm-hmm. It was so visceral. And like you can always tell when somebody's hamming it up, if you like, by like the way that they cry.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's really difficult to like fake cry really effectively.
Yeah.
But she sounded like her fucking world was falling apart.
Yeah.
Like it was heartbreaking.
Agreed.
And I think without wanting to be too like as a woman, but like I think viewing it like as a person who is, you know, like capable of bearing children, that was fucking awful. I don't think it would have affected me so much if I didn't have a uterus.
No, I think that's fair to say. I think, like you say, people capable of childbearing are likely to find that far more harrowing than anyone else. I think for me it was the hardest part to watch because it was like the tipping point of when things started to get really fucked up.
Yeah, like shit got real really quick.
And also I know you've already said that you kind of found it to the detriment of the film, that you think Gaspar Noé is kind of a bit pretentious and just out to shock. But I think that's sort of what works in his favour sometimes, because I'm familiar with his work and generally all bets are off. It was the only point at which I felt like hiding my eyes, because I was just like, Jesus, where is this going to go? Because it could literally be anything with him and it's likely to be really dark.
The fact that the film's called Climax makes you think that it's all going to ramp up right until the very end. So if that's halfway through the film, what the fuck is going to happen next?
Yeah. Also, one thing we haven't talked about before we get too much further, the midpoint credits. How did you feel about that? Because that's sort of, I think it's interesting because that's kind of like the last upbeat music that we hear.
It's like super jarring. The credits are super jarring. It is the last upbeat music that you hear because the music that comes afterwards is really repetitive, but it's like quite tribal,
a bit discordant,
really fractious. It's really tense. Like there is no end to it all the way through. And actually, I don't think I've seen a film before which has been consistently set to music.
Yeah, there were a couple of moments that were
There's one break. There's one break.
Yeah, which I found more jarring than any of the music because it was so
But it's meant...
Yeah, absolutely.
It's meant to be.
But I just thought that was really interesting. Like, to have your kind of title cards at the midpoint, because obviously, again, fuck your format.
Yeah.
But also, it's sort of him being like, here's some upbeat music, here's some really bright, colourful title cards. This is the last nice thing you're ever likely to see. Goodbye.
Yeah, and now I'm gonna fucking ruin your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fuck you, Gaspar Noé. Oh, god damn that man. Yeah. It is definitely from that point that, like, shit really gets real. It's from that point that I think the first thing that happens after that is Psyche pissing on the floor.
Yeah, like the vibe completely changes, the music changes, the lighting continues to change and get darker.
Yeah, it suddenly becomes a lot more aggressive and malicious.
Yeah.
And there's just this sort of sense of dark foreboding. And it's very shortly after that that Tito, who is the only child in the film, is not in his bed where he's meant to be, and it's because he's drinking the sangria.
Yeah.
That, paired with, 4 points in this film, I was like, no. That's one of them.
Okay. Because
that's definitely one of them.
Initially, that didn't... I mean, obviously, it's Gaspar Noé. You know it's not going to end well. But that sort of didn't affect me that much when I realised that the kid had had some of the sangria. It's just like, oh no, child on a trip. That's not going to be fun. But Jesus Christ, where it goes. Ugh.
Yeah. The problem I had with it was, like, I don't know if I'm specifically... affected by, like, harm coming to children at the moment, because my sister has like an 11-month-old or something, and I'm really, really close to him, and I'm like, oh my fucking god, like, I couldn't bear it if something like that happened to Bill.
I don't think that's specific to the situation that you're in. I think that is just, it's very human. And I think...
Yeah, to, like, want to protect children.
Yeah. Interestingly, I just watched Vivarium last weekend, which is kind of the same premise. Like, a couple end up in this house and they are presented with this baby and their instructions are to raise it. And
oh, God.
Despite it being awful, they do what they're told, because that instinct to protect this small human life kind of kicks in.
This is it. We're not Sims. We're not just going to take a baby and put it down in a doorway and step over it and go and eat some lunch. Like, you can't do that. That's not a thing that you can do. Much the same as you probably shouldn't lock a child in an electricity cupboard. Is all I'm going to say.
In her defence, I guess that was the only lockable room. And she's at the point where the drugs are starting to kick in and she's not quite in her right mind, and her instinct is still to protect her son by getting him away from all of the awful adults.
Realistically, I can't say that I would have done any different, because it does not bear thinking about what might have happened to him had he not been locked in a room.
Right.
I feel like, in a really, I get nihilistic, obviously, because it was intended way, Tito being in that room and what happens to him is, like, the most positive outcome.
Yeah, I guess
if the choice is that, or what could have happened to him with all of these terrible people, I would choose that.
I mean, everybody on some level is just sort of driven to a baser instinct, and that is sort of fighting, fucking, pissing on the floor, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
They become animals.
Noé said that he wanted, I really need to oil this chair. He said that this film, he saw it as a direct counterpoint to 2001 Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
In the idea that, like, apes, become human in 2001, and in this film you've got humans who sort of revert back to being a very, like, ape-like state, even to the point of contorting their bodies so they are, like, they look like animals. They don't look like people at one point. It looks like Alpha Centauri from Event Horizon.
Literally, the guy who was the actual contortionist. Oh my god, that was unsettling.
And you can hear his joints dislocating.
Yeah.
And it's fucking horrible.
Well, I mean, towards the end, his contorting becomes so extreme that you get the impression he is actually breaking bones. It's horrifying.
Yeah.
Ugh.
But there's a point where it's all like red lights, everyone's fucking on the floor, people are writhing around screaming, and I'm like, this is like that bit in Event Horizon where they see the video footage of where the portal goes.
These are the cutscenes. Just
God.
splice that into Event Horizon for the director's cut. Oh my god.
Tell me though, if you put that bit into Event Horizon, would you think it was out of place?
No, I wouldn't have questioned it. Not at all.
David's even got symbols daubed on his forehead. Like,
ugh, yeah.
A specific symbol, a swastika. He's got a swastika daubed on his forehead.
Is it bad?
I felt like, did I miss something there?
What?
Because that seemed to happen out of nowhere.
I agree.
And
I didn't really
it felt like walking
that.
into a room and clearly something's happened, but you're only seeing the aftermath of it.
Yeah.
So are we like seeing it through Selva's opinion or
that moment though, to go back to the Tito storyline, that fucking gut punch of a moment where the lights go out and the music stops and you're just like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And
yeah, your initial thought is fuck Tito.
Yeah, there's that dawning realization, and then you realize, oh, he stopped crying behind the door. Fuck.
Because he is yeah, like he's basically locked in an electricity cupboard and just told to not touch that cupboard. But he's a kid on LSD and he thinks something's in that room with him. Mm-hmm. His screams.
Oh my god.
Like, broke my heart.
I wondered if that had been altered, because that was he did sound like an animal at one point.
He sounded utterly terrifying.
That made me cold. Like that made my skin crawl. And you know me, I don't have children. I don't.
You don't care for children.
I don't have much of a maternal instinct.
Yeah.
But obviously that trope is used in films. Like, we are not hardwired to want to see harm come to a child.
Yeah, of course.
Because that's horrifying. And when it does, like, even though I personally was expecting it to kind of play out that way, when it happened, it was just like, oof.
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
Yeah. Yeah. That was definitely a sucker punch.
Jesus.
Because it adds tension to it, because you know it's going to happen. You know that, like, this 5-year-old boy has been locked in an incredibly dangerous place, and you know that at some point he will die.
Yeah.
At some point harm will come to him and he will die, and there are screams and he's terrified, and all of those parts just ramp up the tension, because you know he's going to die, but you have no idea when that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. One thing I will say, I'm quite grateful that it happened off screen. I'm glad we didn't have to watch that.
Yeah.
Equally,
no, I think
the fate of his mum, I'm glad we only had to see the aftermath of that, to be honest.
I actually think that it would have been much less affecting had it been on screen.
Yeah.
Because watching a kid get electrocuted is like, that would be fucking gross, but also I think it would be really difficult to have the adequate effect.
Yeah.
Like, it wouldn't be so like, oh my fucking god, like, you know what's happening, and that sense of dread and doom.
And also, I think
whereas if you'd seen it, you would have been like, oh,
yeah.
No, Tito.
But
okay.
Similar to what we were saying about Omar's character earlier, I think there are so many principal characters in this film that you have to keep on top of and you have to keep up with, and it's flitting back and forth between them. And it's a fucking knackering experience.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
So I think if they cut back to these terrible things being shown on screen, it wouldn't have that visceral effect when you see the aftermath towards the end. Because by that point, you're so tired from keeping up with all these characters, you don't necessarily have the mental capacity to remember all of them and what they were last seen doing. So when you see it, it's like, oh fuck yeah, she said she was going to kill herself.
And it makes you feel really bad.
Yeah.
That, like, you haven't remembered them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, I felt genuinely quite guilty that, like, yeah, Tito's mother, when they find her at the end, because she just runs through a scene at one point going, I'm going to kill myself.
Yeah.
And then you don't see her again.
Mm-hmm.
But
and nobody thinks to check on her or...
But because it's been such, like, a quick instance of her just going, I'm going to kill myself,
mm-hmm.
like, nobody clocks it.
Yeah.
I didn't. I vaguely clocked it.
Mm-hmm. But at that point, it is literal all-out chaos.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
it definitely is.
Trying to kind of sift through and...
It's a massive assault on the senses.
It is, 100%. And I know you kind of criticised the fact that the filming techniques, the upside-down... nature of the camera. I mean, to be honest, turning the camera upside down is a really good way to disorient the audience, and B, a very obvious way of saying this is hell now.
Yeah, no, I thought that was very effective, mm-hmm. used in the right places.
Yeah,
there were some points where that was used where I was like, I don't know why you're doing that. I don't know why you're doing that apart from to be a bit weird. Whereas, like, that like scene in the dance hall where they're all just going fucking crazy. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the prime opportunity to be using upside down camera techniques. And because like I said at the beginning of the film, where people's names flash up and then, like, you kind of forget them and you're not really sure who you're talking about or who you're watching. That scene where it's just a pile of bodies, like,
they could be
writhing around. Like, you've got no fucking idea who's who.
Mm-hmm.
Not a clue. You don't see any faces.
Yeah.
It's just body parts. And it's hellish. And it's all in red light, which is a bit, like...
I feel like I'm reliving it again now and I'm getting tired.
It's exhausting, isn't it? I mean... We've almost been talking about the film for as long as the film
yeah.
was.
I've dedicated nearly 4.5 hours to this nightmare.
All right, okay. So shit gets incredibly real.
Well, there's a couple of moments we haven't touched on yet, of the notable kind of shit hitting the fan. The first is I don't know the the character's name. The one who is they dismiss her as, like, being a bit of a coke fiend. She's interviewed at the start, but we don't get much of her character.
No, I don't know what her name is.
But that moment where Selva's just sort of stumbling through the kitchen and her head is on fire. And it's just like it's shocking, but at the same time almost barely registers because
because stuff is so mental everywhere else.
Yeah.
Like, oh, and she's on fire. Yeah. That was, like, one of the bits I found quite comical.
Yeah.
Because she does run past, like, on fire. It's like, oh, okay, that's fucking happening now then.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing worth talking about is the incest storyline, which, again, in terms of things that are shocking, it's kind of at the bottom of the list.
And isn't that depressing?
No.
In itself, that it's at the bottom of the list.
No.
Like, there's so much heinous shit that went on in this film that's near the bottom. I know that the girl's called Gazelle.
Yes.
Which is a very odd name. I can't remember what the brother's called.
The only reason I remember that is because the actor who plays Selva, I don't know how to pronounce her name. Sophia Butella, I don't know. She played a character called Gazelle in Kingsman. That's the only reason I remember it.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean. Again, you can kind of see it brewing. You can see that the brother is, like, a bit too protective of his sister.
See, I didn't clock that. I didn't see it brewing. I just thought he was an overprotective big brother. Like,
or I totally registered from the outset where she's talking about, like, other guys. You can sense his jealousy about it.
Okay.
that did not come as a surprise to me.
Okay.
I
think also, in this day and age, Pornhub has just, like, numbed us all to incest stuff.
I'm not going to disagree with you. There's no point. Like, yeah, it is. Oh, and I hate that.
I don't have any siblings.
I hate that that's a thing. I don't like that at all.
It's
at least
it's vile.
I'm really glad that I don't have a brother.
Yeah, I mean, we've always
because watching that film, just like, no,
always got the
No,
option
thank
to
you.
just mute it and pretend.
Oh God, Sarah, no.
I'm not saying I would. I'm just.
But you're not saying you wouldn't either.
Shall we move on?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't have any siblings.
Right.
I'm golden.
Okay. You are golden. You're wonderful. Please, let's never talk about this ever again.
I mean,
right at the
it's not the worst thing. It's
What?
not like we're putting this out for the world to hear.
Oh,
You
wait.
know, this is just a conversation between friends. It's fine.
that we happen to be recording.
Oh,
Right at the end. Okay. I will be honest. I didn't understand why it ended the way it ended.
Okay, in what sense?
So, the very end is like Psyche obviously dropping acid in her eyes because she was doing it all along, and she's got books on LSD next to her and stuff.
Yeah.
Like microdosing. I get that bit. Like the army arriving.
Was it the army?
They're wearing hats.
Rosie, it's snowing. Maybe they're just cold.
But they're wearing like camouflage hats and camouflage coats. And there are 3 of them, and they don't look like emergency services. Also, why is anybody turning up at this school hall to like let themselves in? Is it because there's no phone line? Nobody called the emergency services.
All right, you may have just discovered.
The only person
You may have just discovered the first real plot hole.
like the only person who's outside is Omar. So unless they like happen to be wandering by and then they see him and go, "Oh, we better take a look." But it's like they walk in and they know what's happened. They don't seem surprised at all.
They don't. That didn't really strike me as odd. I mean, I get the impression that the school building that they're in is quite remote.
Yeah. So why are they there?
So I'm guessing perhaps like the emergency services can't access it as easily, maybe? I don't really know.
Yeah. Because they don't have cell phones because it's in the 90s. Like, there's no mention of a phone anywhere. There doesn't seem to be like a landline anywhere that anybody uses.
No.
And like, I don't think that if they did call a landline and go, "Help, we've all been spiked with LSD," that it would take them like 8 hours for them to arrive. They don't seem to be at all shocked that Psyche, the German girl, just having a dance, having a lovely time.
She's having a whale of a time
by herself.
Yeah.
And it was so jarring. When they walked in, I was like, "Oh, is this like a government experiment then? Is this a thing that they predispose these people to and they're like watching how they react?"
That did not cross my mind at all.
Maybe I am reading too much into it. I just found it very odd that they seemed completely nonplussed. Like it was something that happened every year. Like, these fucking dance students again. They're always getting off their tits on LSD and just
setting each other
killing
on fire.
each other. Obviously. What I will point out is that as far as I can recall, the only people that died are the people who were the most innocent, in inverted commas.
Yeah.
All the absolute fuckers are fine.
That's true, actually.
And if that isn't a commentary on the nihilism of humanity and how terrible we all are,
100%,
then I don't know what is.
Like, if that isn't nice guys finish last.
But this is kind of my point about feeling like the film was very pretentious, and that no, it's very pretentious, and me not liking that. It's not that I don't appreciate the sentiment behind it, but like I appreciate it in a much more veiled way. Like the people that die are the good people.
Yeah.
Rather than being like, oh, I'm gonna put some Nietzsche and some Franz Kafka here, and then you can all see how incredibly intellectual I am. I don't like that people like my films. Like, fuck off.
So
go and give your mum a hug.
So is it that it's not necessarily the comment that he's making about humanity as a whole?
No.
It's just the heavy-handed manner in which he does it, do you think?
Exactly.
Right.
Like, I completely agree with the sentiment. I think people are awful. Sorry.
Largely, yeah.
Mostly, yeah. No, the nihilistic element of it, I completely agree with, and that's very much sort of like up my alley. And like I was saying, all of the references that he alluded to at the beginning of the film, that's my jam. Like that's stuff that I am interested in. So it's not like our views necessarily differ. It's that I felt like it was really on the nose, and it was somebody standing there saying, look, I'm really clever. I'm really intellectual. Look at these views that I have. And I don't care if you don't agree with them, because that just makes me cooler.
I can definitely appreciate why you feel that way, is what I'll say.
But I don't.
I
just thought...
I would like to... I can't even disagree with you. I'm not going to disagree with you. He is a pretentious fuck. And I think he's a very talented filmmaker. I think he's got a lot to say. I think his films are important in some ways, but I think he does definitely set out to shock, which I have less time for the older I get. I would love to dig a little bit more into into the comment that he's saying about France and the politics of France, and I don't know enough about it to be able to comment right now, but I'd like to dig a little bit deeper, sort of do some independent research after the fact. I feel like there's some kind of cards that flash up every so often, and it's just like there's one towards the end that's like death is a life, whatever, life and death are certainties, and life is a fleeting pleasure. Like the bits in between are a fleeting pleasure, that kind of thing. But there's one near the beginning that's just like, this is a French film and like proud of it or something like that. And obviously isn't
he Argentinian?
He's Argentinian French. I believe he was born in Argentina and he moved to France when he was about 8, I think. So he sort of considers himself a dual citizen. But
that makes sense.
But the dancers are performing in front of a giant French flag. I feel like,
and they're talking about how weird they feel about it as well.
Yeah, so I feel like there's got to be more there that he's trying to say that I'm not aware of.
I am in no doubt that there is so much crowbarred into this film that we just have no idea about.
Yeah.
I think there's so much to unpack. And again, like in the same ilk as Ari Aster, like they just like pack films full of thoughts and references and politics and socioeconomics and stuff that without having like a decent working knowledge of it, you just won't notice.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I think yeah, it definitely stands up to some
some
rewatches.
Well, on that note then, would you watch it again? Would you put yourself through it again?
Yeah, I think I would actually.
Would you?
I don't think that I found it necessarily as like life-alteringly harrowing as you might have expected. I have probably been desensitized to at least some extent by all the French new wave extremism I've watched over the years. But also I just don't tend to get shocked by things that much, especially not anymore. Like the older I've got, the less I'm shocked. So a few bits were like really quite visceral and affected me in the moment. But then afterwards I was like, okay, time for bed.
I'm completely in agreement.
And I slept like a baby.
Like, I can recognise that all these things happening on screen are quite traumatic and they're horrible and people are the worst. But
yeah,
when I switch off, I'm just like, okay.
You're like, okay, time to disassociate now. I can't tell if it's because I've watched too many horror films or because all of the traumas in my own life, I've just been like, nope, not dealing with that.
See, this is it. We've lived through most of 2020. Gaspar Noé films are like light fucking relief at this point.
It's basically Studio Ghibli.
Yeah.
Something, want to chill out. What shall I watch to get away from the world? A bit of Gaspar Noé will do it. And follow it up with Midsommar and see how we go.
Ooh, that would be a hell of a double bill.
Oh.
Just think how well you'd sleep afterwards, though. You'd be exhausted.
I would sleep so well.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So
maybe that's next weekend's plan. Right.
So you would watch it again, but the real question, would you recommend it to anybody? And if so, who?
That's interesting. That's a really difficult question to answer.
I don't think I would actively tell anybody to watch this film.
I think in much the same way that I haven't said to anyone, oh my god, you've got to watch Irreversible, you've got to watch Martyrs, you've got to watch Frontiers. Like, I don't think I would ever, like you say, actively recommend it to somebody because there's a potential that you're going to scar them for life.
Yeah, if you recommend this to the wrong person, you might be forever taken off their Christmas card list.
And there's a lot of things in it which could be pretty fucking triggering.
Yeah, hugely.
So I'd be really reticent to actually recommend it to anyone. But if somebody came to me, conversely, and said, I want something to really fuck me up,
you'd be like, I have
I want something really affecting. Yeah, I'd be like, in my bag of tricks, I have some Gaspar Noé. And I would be much happier recommending like this film than something like a Serbian film, which I genuinely think is just shocking for the sake of being shocking. Like,
well, it is, but that's the point.
Yeah, but why?
Well, because the Serbian government is so strict and so extreme and has so much weight over the Serbian film industry that it was literally just a massive fuck you. Because they interfere so much in terms of what can and can't be shown. I'm not defending it.
That one I agree.
I think it's I think it's a horrendous, horrible film that I never want to experience ever again. That is truly one I wish I could unsee.
Yeah.
But I do think it served a purpose.
Yeah, I do. But I think it served a purpose for, like, Serbia.
Yeah.
Rather than
yeah,
a wider audience. But yeah, getting off track. No, I would not recommend it freely. Yes, I would recommend it based on the correct, like, questions being asked.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I'm the same. I'm of the same opinion. There are very few people I could recommend this to.
Yeah, it's not like a Friday night flick to have with your takeaway, is it?
No. So, what would you score it out of 10 then?
I reckon probably I didn't hate it. I liked the film. I liked what it said. I didn't necessarily like the way that it was said. So I am going to go with a 6.5.
Okay. I'm going to go for an 8.5.
You bloody loved it, didn't you?
To say I loved it makes me sound like a psychopath. Which
I called Martyrs enjoyable.
You
before.
did. And I'm not saying I'm not a psychopath. But please don't call me that to my face because it's hurtful.
Just make sure it's behind your back.
Yeah, I just don't want to know about it. I'm a very sensitive psychopath. I think it's a masterpiece. I think it's very meticulously crafted. I think the camera techniques, the single takes, the tracking shots are beautiful. I think the acting, especially considering almost everybody in it is not a professional actor, is phenomenal for the most part.
And pulling off a 42-minute single shot with actors who aren't actors.
Yeah, it's absolute insanity. And I loved it.
You were here for it.
I am.
I would really like to see Love.
Okay.
I think that might be more up my alley, actually.
Wait, that's what she said.
Oi, oi!
I quite enjoyed Love. I think it's sort of dismissed as like porn with a storyline. Which it is, but it's a much gentler film than we're used to from him. It's still harrowing, it's still bleak, I think.
Yeah.
But and I wouldn't say the characters are people you can root for either, especially the male protagonist. He's awful, largely.
I'm not necessarily sure that I've seen a character in a Gaspar Noé film that I haven't been like, yeah, you could probably die.
That's the general sentiment. Yeah,
I've never been like, oh, I love you. You must be protected at all costs. Apart from Tito.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say watch Love though. It's not a palate cleanser by any means, but but it's worth watching.
It's not the pickled ginger of the Gaspar Noé world.
I believe that's on Netflix, or it was. That's where I watched it. So
neat. Okay. Yeah, so Climax is available on UK Netflix anyway at the moment. Don't know if it's on US Netflix or not, and I'm not going to check. So you're going to have to look for yourselves. But yeah, we've been yammering for an hour and a half now, and I think
we've done some big talking.
We've been doing a big talk.
Yeah.
We had a lot to say, but thank you guys so much for tuning in. As ever, we really appreciate your support. We really appreciate all of your listens. It makes us very, very happy when that counter is going up. And that's it for this week, but we'll be back next week with our mini-sode and another show the week after that. So until then, stay spooky.
Hey guys.